Hello and welcome back to another edition of a different kind of power rankings. We're getting down to it. Only a few weeks left, so only a few more of these. Kind of sad because they've been a lot of fun, but let's enjoy them while we have them. So if this is the first time you've seen it, the way that this works is I use analytics kind of. What I use is I look at historically how well you do in certain positions, gives you points, factor that into wins, and then I use PFF grades to see where are these teams now and how many wins that equates to and how many wins that you deserve for each position, and then I just put them all in order. It's kind of a fun way to see basically who's been lucky and who hasn't, roughly. There's obviously, it's not a foolproof system, but it'll get you mostly there. So with that being said, let's just get into it. And also one last thing I forgot to mention. So I use PFF grades for everything but kicker. Kicker is the one exception that I just use kicking percentage, which still isn't perfect, but it'll get you in the ballpark. Same thing like with the PFF grades. And what you're looking at is the bottom is the key, so that'll tell you what tier you are in terms of which position. So basically, you look up and the Texans, or let's use the Lions offensive line as an example, that gives you 1.14 wins. You look at the bottom at the key, that means you get 1.14. That is a tier 3. So tier 3 offensive line. So that just makes things easier. And also at the end, you have the total number of wins, wins earned, which basically just means how many does that equate to for how many games you played. And then finally, wins, that's how many actual wins you have. So yeah, I mean, right off the bat, it's kind of the usual suspects here at the bottom four. You have the Lions, you have the Jets, you have the Jaguars, and the Texans are the number 32 team. I mean, this Texans team is bad across the board. The only thing they have is a solid pass rush, at least like an okay pass rush. Actually, tier 2 pass rush, that's pretty good. So you'll take that. Unfortunately, pass rush just doesn't matter as much as people say it does. And also, you have some kicking points there. So that's all they get, only 0.68 wins throughout 17, which means that they've only earned 0.5 wins up until this point. They do have 2 wins. So hey, good work, David Coley, getting an extra win and a half above what this roster probably deserves, which I actually kind of agree with. I think that's probably about accurate. I think that they have overperformed, which is kind of funny to think. Number 31, you have the Jaguars, who again, not a lot of talent. Listen, you're not going to see a lot of talent here on any of these, but you do get some advantage with the offensive line. And the running game for the most part, and that's just rushing the ball, not run blocking, has been good for most of this season. It's fallen off a little bit. It was tier 1 for a decent chunk, not anymore. And hey, coverage getting up to tier 4. That's an improvement from what it has been at certain points. Still not a great team. They've earned 1.8 wins. They have 2. The Jets, meanwhile, another team that's overperformed by a win, but that's not too crazy. A good offensive line with the Jets. That's pretty much all they have going for them, but at least that's a start. They could really use some receiving help. Obviously, Zach Wilson hasn't had a great rookie season, so that's not spectacular. A little bit of pass rush, just not much else there. They need defense and they need receivers badly. I kind of like the idea of get the receivers, try to build an offense around Wilson, see if you have a guy there, and if you don't, well, then you're screwed anyways. So what's it matter if your defense still sucks? And 29, the Detroit Lions here. So Lions a little bit more talent than everyone else around here, although quarterback, which had been tier 4 for most of this season, has fallen to tier 5, so that's not ideal. Solid offensive line, though. You do have, again, a little bit of wide receiver help, a little bit of running game. Defense has been horrible. Kicking has been all right, so 2.3 wins earned. So they've only won 1.5 games, so a little bit underperformed, but you're right around where you should be. All right, next 4, we're getting a little bit more interesting here. We're getting to the playoff contenders because that's how this season has been. There's been 4 teams that have no shot, and everyone else has a shot, seemingly. Not exactly, but basically. Where what's happening here is Panthers 28, not great for the Panthers. They got off to that hot start, and it's really fallen off the rails since then. The offense just, it hasn't been good. I mean, the talent just isn't there. So you can blame whatever coach you want to blame, but if the talent's not there, you're not going to win games. Still like their defense, especially their coverage. Didn't have its best day against Atlanta, but part of that is just Matt Ryan. So not a very talented team. They, according to this, have overperformed though. So coaching might get the blame. Don't know if that's totally fair. Although, again, part of that might be, how much of it was Joe Brady, who's now no longer with the Panthers. The Giants here, quarterback play's been solid for them this season via PFF, which I don't totally disagree with. Maybe not sure if it's tier 3, but it's at least tier 4. So they have that going for them. Coverage has been solid as well at tier 3, just not a lot else going. Number 26, you have the Seahawks, who, again, tier 3 quarterback play. Russell Wilson did have a good game against the Texans, albeit it was the Texans, but still, they stop the run well, don't do much else well on defense, so that's kind of an issue. Receiving core has been better, but again, we expected this to be tier 1 quarterback and receiving play. It hasn't lived up to that, so that's why they're currently here at 26. And I should mention, part of that has been injuries, but injuries are, they're included here. Like, it's whoever takes a snap, doesn't matter who takes a snap, that's what gets put into the algorithm. So 25, the Steelers were, hey, how about Big Ben getting up to tier 4 quarterback play? That helps. I mean, that's significant. Like, that does change things. Offensive line's a little bit better, tier 3, so that kind of stuff helps. And wide receiving play gets up to tier 4, which it had been tier 5 for a good chunk. And of course, their front 7 is very good. Still don't cover well, though, so that's a huge issue. And because of that, that's a big reason why they're so far down, along with, they need to have still better quarterback play and better receiving play to really climb the rankings a little bit. But they're a team that's continued to overperform this algorithm. 4.4 wins earned, but they've won 6.5 games, so over 2 wins above what expected for the Steelers. That's, good because, again, very well coached, and maybe they can pull off more upsets and get into the postseason. All right, next 4. So you have the Balls here at 24. That is the Washington football team. Great offensive line. That's absolutely true. Quarterback play tier 4. So you'll take that if you're Washington. Again, that's been tier 5 at times this season. And then again, it's their front 7 in really the way they stop the run. Pass rush has fallen a bit, but that's largely due to injuries. So that's what's factoring in there. Not a spectacular team, but they kind of know what they are and can run with that. So that's part of why they've overperformed a little bit of the algorithm, but just not sure how talented this team is. Number 23, the Chicago Bears, who, again, they've kind of been around here this entire, second half of the season. Below the 16 mark, but still not, horrible. Where they're going to be here is, okay, tier 4 quarterback play, you'll take that. And like I keep saying, it's not just Fields, it is Andy Dalton, but they've both been that tier 4 quarterback, so that's cool. Really good running game, and that's kind of been what's getting them here is good running game and then just some points across the board. That's what's getting them to 5.1 wins earned. They have underperformed, though, at just 4 wins. So if you needed another reason to say fire Matt Nagy, well, there it is. Number 22, the Atlanta Falcons, who are trying to make a postseason run. It's largely due to their quarterback play and also receiving play. A lot of it is Kyle Pitts, who's done a lot. A lot of it is Cordero Patterson. And even Russell Gage, I thought, had a good game against Carolina. So you're throwing that in there with an inconsistent offensive line, but it has had its moments, both positive and negative. And you're getting a little bit of stuff in the defense. Defense, not great, but that's why they're here. 5.4 wins earned, 6 total wins. They could be a playoff team. It's not crazy to think. 21, how about Tua getting that tier 2 quarterback play? He was here last week. I think last week, maybe even the week before. So that's encouraging. And the receiving core has played a lot better recently as well. I think those two are kind of tied together. Defense maybe hasn't even been as what you would have hoped. I mean, a lot of people would say that should be a coverage 1, tier 1 coverage unit. So if that is, well, then, add an extra 1.5. This puts you at, a total of 9 wins expected for 17, but obviously not exactly how that works. But they're a team that's they're not a team that's overperformed. According to this, they've overperformed by 0.3 wins, which is, that's basically right where you should be. You can't, if you've earned 5.7 wins, you can't actually win exactly 5.7 games unless you have a bunch of ties in there. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's not how that works. But anyways, let's just move on. All right, so here we go. Next for a couple of interesting teams here. So the Saints stay here at number 20. They have 6 wins. They've earned 5.7 wins. And you can see how, tier 4 quarterback play, you could argue that's because of injuries, but it was tier 4 when Winston was still in there, so that's worth noting. Defense is what's gotten them here, and then you just have some talent across the board and a good offensive line. I mean, it's tier 3, but part of that has been injuries as well. Number 19 with the Baltimore Ravens. This is a bit interesting because they're a team that's massively overperformed their wins expected. But as I say every week, I don't think the algorithm correctly puts Lamar Jackson here. Although one thing I do have to say is the Ravens have been seemingly, I don't know if this is true or not, but from what I've been watching, it seems like they do a lot less design Lamar Jackson runs. I'd like to see them go back to that, run more of those. That's kind of how I feel, because, that's how you get those extra couple of wins there in either the running game or the quarterback game. I don't agree that Lamar has been tier 4 quarterback, but that's what they say. So again, you're allowed to disagree. It's fine. You don't have to agree with every single grade, but I agree with most of them. Number 18, Denver Broncos, another team that's overperformed, expected. But what's interesting about them is they've kind of been an offensive team, according to this. Solid quarterback play, solid receiving play. That receiving play has been tier 1 at times. It's the defense that's kind of been underwhelming, so that's a little bit fascinating. Number 17, you have the Kansas City Chiefs here, who, tier 1 offensive line, tier 3 quarterback, and tier 3 receiving room. However, part of me wonders if just the threat of like Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill actually add more value than they have, than Mahomes has played this season. Part of me just wonders that. And then, coverage has really come into their own at tier 2, so that's promising as well. They're a team that's overperformed massively, but like I said, I wonder how much of that is just the name on the back of Mahomes' jersey. I wonder how much that just adds alone of the way teams play him. And also, of course, Andy Reid, great coach, so it does kind of make sense. They're a team that overperformed last year as well, which makes sense because they had 14 wins. All right, so next 4. So number 16, we have the Cleveland Browns, who have been the definition of inconsistent this season. Good offensive line, but Baker being tier 4, although we've seen him be maybe not tier 1, but a tier 2 quarterback at times this season. So you just hope that continues. I love their coverage unit. It's had some bad moments, but for the most part, it has been very good. That's been a huge reason why the Browns are still in the playoff mix here. So you keep that going, and you just get some better play from Mayfield and maybe get some better play from the receiving game. They pretty much, they're right at where they should be, 7 wins, and they have 6.9 wins earned. Number 15, the Las Vegas Raiders, who they're a little bit underperforming, which makes sense given their coaching staff, I think. And you also have to factor in, like, offensive line's horrible. Like, that's just, it's not good. I know they put some resources into it, but they made some moves that, okay, I get why they made them at the time, but they haven't worked out in terms of the offensive line. And, Derek Carr's tier 2. I think that's fine. Wide receiving game's been tier 2. I think that checks out as well. And, coverage been tier 3. I think that's understandable given how kind of the last few games have gone. So, there's stuff to like about this Raiders team. They're not a bad team. Being mediocre, that does actually check out. That's where I had them pegged preseason, and it's kind of, lived up to fruition, I think. 14, the Philadelphia Eagles, who, actually fall a bit. I think they were pretty high, but I think they lost that. They had tier 1 running game status and dropped to tier 2, which is a big drop. So that's kind of why, which again, if you think they should have tier 1, just add 2 wins to their total score, and that's where they'd be at, just a little under 2 wins. Good offensive line, solid quarterback and receiving play. It's been a bit inconsistent, but solid. And then defense gives you some points across the board. So I think the Eagles are good. I think they're a talented team. I don't think it's crazy to think that the Eagles, I'm thinking back now when I made my video about where I predicted every single game and then said who's going to make the playoffs given these predictions. I believe I had the Washington football team beating the Eagles twice. In hindsight, that was incorrect. I should have had the Eagles at least winning one of those, if not both. So because of that, I think the Eagles, I think there's a real chance they make the postseason. And number 13, the San Francisco 49ers here. Listen, awesome offensive line. Like, Trent Williams is just like, he's just like the best player in football, basically. If you take out positional importance, he's just like amazing. Also, solid quarterback play, really good receiving play. An element of that is Kyle Shanahan scheming them open, I think, but still, really good receiving play. They haven't done it with a great running back, but what they have done is scheme guys open with that Shanahan thing. And then you have, defense, which is doing stuff well, stops the run well and covers well. Maybe not elite at either, but good at both. And so you have, 7.8 wins earned, only 7 wins. So they've actually even been a little bit unlucky. So that's promising for the 49ers. All right, so next 4, and there's a huge surprise at the number 12 spot that people will be mad at because I know that there's Cardinals fans who watch this. Good amount of Cardinals fans on this channel, actually, so appreciate you, Cardinals fans. Listen, I like the Cardinals, but here's why the Cardinals are number 12. Is Kyler Murray's been tier 1. There's no denying that, even when he's they've missed 3 games, they still have tier 1 quarterback status and tier 1 receiving status. That is the heart of this team. But the offensive line hasn't graded particularly well. The running game and the run defense hasn't graded particularly well. And the biggest reason why they've fallen is the coverage has dropped off a bit. This was a tier 1 coverage unit at the time. Did not have a great game against the Rams. It has fallen relatively significantly. So that wasn't great. So a lot of issues there. That being said, it's still a very talented team, and they still have 7.9 wins earned out of the 10 that they have. And I think it's fair to say, Cliff Kingsbury has done a great job coaching this season. I think it's fair to say, maybe that's an element of it. Maybe not a whole 2.1 wins element of it, but that's a chunk of it. So the Cardinals are still very good. I think 12 feels very low to me, but again, this is the algorithm. I don't make the rules of who gets put in which tier. All I do is make the algorithm, and this is where they end up. Number 11, the Titans, which this checks out, right? Tier 1 coverage, that's awesome. Tier 2 quarterback play, that's Ryan Tannehill to a T. Solid receiving core. It's been banged up, so it's been a bit inconsistent, and that's kind of been the thing. Is obviously with Derrick Henry, you're adding an extra, close to 2 wins to that total score. That just changes things. So they're a good team, but the injuries have kind of hurt them on the field and also in the algorithm. Number 10, you have the Chargers here. So Chargers, again, tier 2 for Herbert, that helps. In tier 2 receiving game, that's another thing that helps. And then you have good coverage. Wonder how much of that is scheme, but still, good coverage. They're right where they should be with 8 wins earned and 8 actual wins. So there you go. Number 9, how about the Colts? The Colts at one point were a bottom 4 team according to this algorithm. They're now climbing up all the way to a top 10 team. So very cool stuff there, and a big chunk of it is obviously Jonathan Taylor. He gets you 2.5 wins, and it's a true tier 1 running game. Some of these I'm like, okay, that's not really a tier 1 running game. For Taylor, it is. Really good, just stuff across the board. Not spectacular or anything except for run defense, which has also been tier 1, but then a lot of tier 3s. So you have a lot of tier 3s of a couple tier 1s. That'll get you a top 10 spot. And also part of me does wonder, with the offensive line, if they were fully healthy, where would they be? Probably higher than tier 3, I would presume. Okay, next 4, we have a tie for the 7 spot with Cincinnati and with Minnesota, and both of them with tier 1 quarterback play. Let's start with Minnesota. Again, PFF loves Kirk Cousins. I don't know if he's been a tier 1 quarterback, but I don't know if he hasn't. I keep saying he has played really good this year. I know it seems crazy to say tier 1 Kirk Cousins, but he's been very good this season. Receiving core is awesome. We all know that. That is the strength of this team. So naturally, they're a run-first team, which they've actually gotten away from a bit, which has worked out. Although, again, Dalvin Cook, when he's been healthy, has been spectacular. So, Dalvin Cook's been banged up, which is part of why they don't get that 2.5 win mark that you expect them to get in the running game. The coaching has been an issue with the Vikings. We know this, but again, they're a team that I think they're a playoff caliber team. I think having them as a top 8 talent team isn't crazy, but I also think it's they just need to extrapolate their talent a little bit better from their roster. Tied for 7. Number 7 again, Cincinnati Bengals. How about Joe Burrow, tier 1 quarterback? He's been very good. I don't hate it. Tier 2 receiving play, that checks out as well. And then, tier 3 coverage. Not a ton else to love about this team, but again, you get that tier 1 quarterback and tier 2 receiving play, you're going to be a team that's going to be tough to beat no matter what. So they are a team that's underperformed a bit. That does check out a bit with how Zach Taylor has performed as a coach, in my opinion. How about number 6, the Buffalo Bills? So they're a team that's also underperformed a bit with 8.8 wins earned, only 7 actual wins. I put a lot of that just on luck at you. I think there's been some flukiness. Football is an inherently fluky sport. Some teams do get unlucky. One interesting thing that I keep saying is, they've been getting credit for tier 1 running game this entire time and tier 3 quarterback play this entire time. I don't know if that's fair, but also the difference between dropping them to a tier 2 running game and then also putting their quarterback play to tier 1, that's basically is a push. So I think that their actual net points is about the same, even though I disagree with how they got there, if that makes sense. Also really good coverage, but again, with Tre'Davious White out, does that hurt them a bit? I think Buffalo's still a very good team, though. Number 5, the Dallas Cowboys, who people have all of a sudden said, oh, they're actually a defensive first team. Like, no, they're not. Like, the talent doesn't back that up. They're definitely an offensive first team with a great offensive line, tier 2 quarterback, tier 1 wide receiving game, and then their defense does some stuff well as well. Very good coverage unit as tier 2. So I'm not saying the coverage is bad or anything, but just I'm not saying their defense is bad or anything, but I do think this is an offensive first team, and they're right where they should be at. 9.1 wins earned, 9 actual wins, so there you go. All right, so top 4, I don't think this is that crazy. You know, the Rams, I'll say this about the algorithm. They're a team that I've kind of, been consistently lower on the Rams than the algorithm has. Well, the algorithm's saying, see, told you. Jackson, has been so consistently like high on the Cardinals over the Rams. The algorithm has been the opposite. Well, okay, this one goes to the algorithm, I guess, given that Monday night game. Good offensive line for the Rams, and then tier 2 receiving game and quarterback play. That's all checks out. Defense hasn't been what it has been in years past. Largely the coverage hasn't been what it has been in years past, but the rest is still very good. So a 12.5 win team is where the Rams are projected through 17. They have 9.5 wins earned. They've won actually 9 games, so that's where they're at. Number 3, you have the Green Bay Packers, another team who's right where they should be. In fact, numbers 2, 3, and 4 are all kind of right where they should be. Where tier 3 quarterback play, I know people are going to be mad at that and say, no, Rodgers is the MVP. How could you have him tier 3? I wouldn't have him tier 3. Like, I probably would have him tier 1, quite frankly. But, I think you can make an argument. I guess I would say this. I think you can make a strong argument for him not being tier 1. Like, he still does have some bad games on his resume. He still does. Like, he's missed a game, the Seattle game and the Saints game. Those are on his resume. And whether you can say, those were, there was different circumstances, which you can do. I think a lot of people would say he just ran the LaFleur offense, which is kind of the case. But at the same time, if you don't have to do anything crazy, don't do anything crazy. Hit the open guy. It's hard to hold it against him. But regardless, really good running game, obviously. Tier 1, that checks out. Good receiving game. Big chunk of that is Devontae Adams, but still, good receiving game. And then, across the board with the coverage unit and everything. Good pass rush with Rashawn Gary turning into, finally developing into what we thought he would be when he got drafted. So, good stuff for Green Bay. Going up to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, this is a team where the Packers kind of have a lot of chunks across the board. The Buccaneers are kind of just in a couple of different categories. What's fascinating is, Tampa Bay tier 2 offensive line, tier 1 quarterback play with Brady, tier 2 wide receiving play. I don't know if I fully agree that tier 2 receiving play. I think part of it is they were banged up in the middle of the season. I'd have that tier 1. I would. And you could argue the offensive line as well. Although I would say the offensive line pass blocks a little better than they run block, so maybe that's why. Also, Tampa Bay coverage being tier 1 is absurd. That's just crazy that it's that high. Jamel Dean, I know, is graded very well, and also their safeties have all graded very well, so I think that's a big chunk of it. So I think their wide receiving should be a little bit higher, and their coverage should be a little bit lower. So I don't hate the actual outcome again, but not sure exactly how they got there. But yeah, I mean, them and Green Bay are certainly neck and neck. I do think that, I still like Arizona a lot. I still like the Rams a lot. I'd probably at this point say Tampa Bay and Green Bay are the 2 favorites in the NFC. And then number 1, the New England Patriots continue to they just have so many tier 1s. You look at the tier 1s across the board. So it's tier 2 offensive line, but then tier 1 quarterback, tier 1 wide receiving room, tier 1 running game, tier 2 run defense, followed by a tier 1 coverage, and then, tier 3 pass rush, and tier 1 kicker. I mean, just an incredible team that they have going for them right now. The maximum wins earned you can get through 17 is 17.88, which is a little over 17 actual wins, but that does check out. You can be a little bit better than a 17-win team, even though it doesn't really make sense, but it kind of does if you think about it. They're a team that's currently on pace, according to this. They should, them underperforming is 16-1. That's what this algorithm says. Actually, in fact, 16-0-1 is underperforming according to the algorithm. They've earned 12.7 wins. They've only actually won 9 games. But part of me also wonders, is Mac Jones really tier 1? I've been saying this a bit. Not really. He's been very good, but does he deserve a tier 1 grade? It's kind of more of there just hasn't been 5 true tier 1 quarterbacks this year, so he probably hasn't actually earned that much that you typically would expect. But still, I think everything else pretty much checks out. I don't have too many other issues. So even if you drop Mac Jones to, you could drop him to tier 2 or tier 3 even, and he's not going to be, they're still the number 1 team. In fact, I'm bad at math. You could drop him to tier 4 and they're still the number 1 team if everything else stays the same. That's how far ahead they are of everyone else. So Patriots and Buccaneers, back-to-back weeks, those are tier 1 and 2. The Belichick and Brady dynasty certainly not over, even though they're playing for different teams. So yeah, that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. Of course, as always, thanks for watching.